It's been suggested that we take 7.6 next, since there's some people to speak to that. If there are no objections, is there a motion for 7.6?
So moved.
Okay, and I don't know who's wrangling this.
You're not doing all the rest of it.
President Irwin.
The superintendent, I believe, was actually going to introduce 7.6.
We didn't get you enough face time. So, no one ever called me. No one ever talked about me as a breath of fresh air. I know that.
Well, but you are. Yes, I'm going to introduce. We have David Wilson here this evening from the Downtown Improvement District. President Irwin and I have been meeting with him to talk about how do we look at green space in downtown, and how do we try to address how we deal with both the creation and the maintenance and long-term investments of green space in downtown. So I'm pleased to have David Wilson come up and talk about what the DID efforts are around those efforts, and where I think we as an organization need to work with the DID in those efforts. Thanks, David.
Thank you for observing our budget process.
Such as it is.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Wilson. I'm a resident of Minneapolis, and I work downtown. And I serve on the board of the Downtown Improvement District and the Downtown Council. And I really speak to you tonight related to those two positions that I hold. What I want to talk to you about this evening, and I believe you all have the PowerPoint presentation in front of you, is an initiative to create a new nonprofit organization that can partner with the private sector, with public entities, and with other nonprofit organizations to enhance the greening and public realm of downtown Minneapolis. So, turning your attention to the next slide, I mentioned that I am on the board of the Downtown Council. We have been working for the last year on a strategic plan for downtown Minneapolis. It's called the 2025 plan. That plan is due to be released in December of this year. And one of the committees that has been working on this plan is called the Greening and Public Realm Committee. And I chaired that committee. And what became very obvious to us as we were talking to stakeholders, residents of downtown, businesses, property owners, and indeed some of the public sector entities like the City of Minneapolis, Metro Transit, etc., is that there was a strong desire that the downtown become a more livable place, a greener place, frankly a more beautiful place. And there are a lot of reasons that we gathered during that planning process on why that's important. Number one, the number of residents that are living downtown are increasing every year. Number two, in order to attract and retain the best and brightest people to come work in our city, we need our downtown to be as attractive, if not more attractive, to competing cities. And we live in a beautiful city, and when I live on one of the parkways, and when you travel throughout the city, the park system is spectacularly beautiful. It's what makes this city so great. Unfortunately, when you go downtown, we have a donut. We have an area that is primarily concrete. The beautiful tree canopy, the urban forest that we have in our neighborhoods is absent downtown for many reasons. It's hard to grow trees downtown. And we are actually short on park space downtown. There was a study done by the Trust for Public Land for the City of Minneapolis looking at the entire city, and downtown was one of the key areas where we were short on parks. So in the 2025 plan, you're going to find a number of initiatives to green downtown and to improve the public realm of downtown. I've mentioned some of these things on the slide. There's an initiative to really make Nicollet Mall something much greener and much more beautiful and much more pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly than it is today. PD Plaza, you have probably heard that the city is working on having that park space renovated. The Gateway Initiative, I actually spoke to all of you, I think maybe 9 months ago, about the Gateway Park Initiative, which is an initiative that several different stakeholders are hoping to push forward downtown. In fact, President Irwin sits on the committee representing all of you on how we can make that vision come to life. The Downtown 2025 plan talks about the Mississippi Riverfront and the importance of connecting the thousands, actually almost 200,000 people who work downtown and the 30-some thousand who live downtown, connecting the central business district to the beautiful riverfront. And then lastly, and I mentioned this, the Downtown 2025 plan talks about street trees. And frankly, this is one of my, I am so thrilled to hear that we're going to be planting trees that were destroyed in the tornado in North Minneapolis. But downtown, we never actually had any large trees to begin with. And there are a lot of reasons for that. When the sidewalks were put in, many of them were put in without any places to plant trees. Where there are places to plant trees, there are typically utilities underground that make it difficult to actually plant them properly. So the trees that are put in have very short lifespans. We do believe, based on looking at other cities, that we can create a green tree canopy downtown, but it's going to take a lot more investment than what we're currently doing today. We also are going to look at the freeway medians, the entranceways to our downtown. We're going to look at green corridors. So we want to make Nicollet Mall and some other streets truly green corridors. Instead of having it just be a place for cars, also make them places for people. So we have a lot of big plans and, frankly, expensive plans on how to make downtown Minneapolis a greener and more livable place. So what's the problem? Quite frankly, I've now moved on to slide 3. Quite frankly, the traditional stakeholders who have, frankly, have made this a beautiful city, the Park and Recreation Board as the #1 public stakeholder, there are huge fiscal constraints today in investing in greening in public realm. The city of Minneapolis has struggled to maintain and enhance some of its public realm spaces like PV Plaza. And so single-handedly, there is an inability for our public stakeholders to make the investments that are required for these new initiatives and, frankly, to enhance some of the existing initiatives. PV Plaza, for example, millions of private dollars are going to have to be raised to bring that city park up to the vision that has been created for it. So working on these different initiatives, what has become glaringly clear is that we need a nonprofit organization that can be a partner on doing this. How do we bring various public sector stakeholders, whether it's the city, the county, the Park and Recreation Board, how do we actually coordinate to do fundraising for some of these initiatives, to coordinate how the Park and Rec Board might work perhaps with the city on this vision for the Gateway? And the solution that we are convinced makes sense is to create a nonprofit organization that could become a coordinator of these greening and public realm initiatives downtown. I've listed some of the key things that organization would do. It would do strategic planning. There are over a dozen different greening and public realm initiatives that are being talked about and planned downtown by different entities and stakeholders, and none of them are coordinated. And I like to joke with Mayor Ryback that we're going to have the city's Christmas tree and menorah in 6 different parks, and on the night of lighting the tree, it's going to have to run to 6 different places because we're building these amenities without coordinating what the programming is for each one of them and how they should be used and can be made most valuable. So strategic planning and coordinating for those entities that actually want that single clearinghouse that can say, hey, when is the county rebuilding Washington Avenue, and can we get street trees planted there? Second is fundraising. How do we fundraise from the private sector, from other nonprofits that might be interested in granting monies, and from individuals to actually fund these huge investments in greening and public realm? Thirdly, in some cities, there are organizations, nonprofit organizations, that actually help develop new parks and public realm. So they actually have the capabilities to do design, hire contractors to build things, to maintain things. So there might be that desire and need from some of the stakeholders in Minneapolis. Then maintenance and programming of parks. I've met with the folks who are working on PV Plaza, and once they raise the money and get the plaza built, they're still trying to figure out how is this going to be maintained on an ongoing basis, how is it going to be programmed to make sure that it's being used by the public. And one of the things that they're looking for is a nonprofit partner who might have the expertise to do that. And then lastly, and I mentioned this, just the coordination. With so many different public and private stakeholders that are interested in greening and public realm initiatives downtown, how do we make sure that they're coordinated and working together, that we're not duplicating effort or perhaps wasting public and private funds because we're duplicating what we're building? So those are the things that we're hoping a new nonprofit organization can do. I'm going to move on to slide 4, Commissioners. So we've done a little bit of analysis about what a successful nonprofit organization would do.
Somebody needs to move your number 4, or you need to push a button.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that didn't do it automatically. The next generation of technology, when I do that, will do it. Thank you, Commissioner. So on slide 4, I wanted to quickly walk through some of the things that we think this nonprofit organization needs to be very good at if we indeed create it. The first one is having a flexible operating model that supports different types of stakeholders and functions. So take the street trees example. Currently, the Park and Recreation Board maintains the street trees in downtown Minneapolis. But because of the very difficult environment to plant and grow those trees, we don't have a very good result. What a nonprofit organization could do is it could say, you know what, we're going to go to the stakeholders like the private property owners, the businesses downtown, perhaps even residents who want better street tree canopy. We're going to raise funds, and we're going to work as a partner with the Park and Recreation Board to augment the funds already spent and improve the way we're actually preparing the ground for these trees and actually creating new places where we can plant trees. So that's an example of a partnership that this organization might do. On PV Plaza, it might be a totally different type of initiative where the city of Minneapolis might approach this organization and say, hey, we've built this beautiful new enhanced PV Plaza, but we need somebody who will actually run it for us because it's not something that the city is set up to do. And so that might be how this organization would operate there. So those are just 2 examples. I can go on, the medians that are owned by the Minnesota Department of Transportation that are downtown, and how do we get those cleaned up, perhaps planted actually with either native plantings or shade trees. So it could be lots of different partners, lots of different types of initiatives. We need a robust fundraising capability. We need an organization that specializes in raising funds from nonprofits, private individuals, and businesses. We need the coordination because we have wonderful public sector entities that are very committed to this but are short on resources. So we need to figure out how do we get all these stakeholders, particularly in a difficult economic and fiscal environment, how do we leverage and make all these organizations work together to actually achieve this vision of a greener and more beautiful downtown. We need an organization that has project management capabilities that can spend these funds effectively to help bring these new greening and public realm amenities to life. We need an organization that does this at scale. On my first page slide, I mentioned that there's perhaps $150 million or more, we don't really know yet, of amenities that are being envisioned for downtown over the next 15 years. Well, we need an organization that can operate at scale to help bring those to life. And then lastly, we think it has to be an organization focused geographically on downtown. We don't think that it will work to have an organization that's trying to do this across the entire city or even more broadly into suburban areas or St. Paul. I'm going to move to slide 5, and Commissioner, I'm going to actually hit the button too. So, okay, so that's our grand vision, that we're going to create this nonprofit partner to help make downtown more beautiful and green. How are we going to go about doing this? You'll see on the first point that we've decided there aren't any experts on how to do this, quite frankly. There are models in other cities, there are organizations in other cities, but we have to figure out what's right for Minneapolis and what's right for the unique stakeholders that we have in this city. And so we want to hire a consultant that specializes in looking at these types of issues, and that consultant will do a number of things. Number one, they're going to look at the 2025 plan that lists these different greening and public realm initiatives and develop some budget forecasts. How much is it going to cost to actually do these types of things? Because right now we don't really know how much money we're talking about. Then we're going to have that consultant actually think through, based on models that are operating successfully in other cities, what type of organization could do that. And quite frankly, there might be existing organizations today that could be augmented to actually support this function, perhaps the Minneapolis Foundation, which is a great organization that already exists. Or this consultancy might say, you know what, there isn't an organization today that exists or that could grow into this type of role, and you need to create a new one. We don't know what the right answer is, and that's what we want to hire a consultancy to figure out. We are... So the Downtown Improvement District is acting as a fiscal agent, so they have agreed. I actually gave a similar presentation to that board about 6 weeks ago. They have agreed to actually act as a fiscal agent and a coordinating entity for this, but they're not necessarily the sponsor of this initiative. They're just a coordinator and fiscal agent. And then how do we pay for this? So we have estimates somewhere in the $75,000 to $100,000 range to actually do this feasibility study. And so we are looking for a mixture of funding and support from private individuals, from businesses that are downtown. We have made a request to the city of Minneapolis for some funding, and as you have before you, a request to the Park and Recreation Board. And last but not least, there is a large nonprofit organization that we have submitted a grant request to, and they are considering that request as we speak. With that, I think I've run over Superintendent Miller's directions that I should talk for no longer than 5 minutes. Thank you for your time and attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
We'll both have questions for ourselves and you. So, Vice President Young.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I live in the Phillips neighborhood, and I work in North Minneapolis, and they are driven by nonprofits, and so every time I hear somebody wants to start a new nonprofit, my thorns go up my back. There are so many nonprofits in this city, so having more just, I think, complicates things. I need to tell you that on this particular resolution, the word conservancy appears, and I think some of us have a bad taste in our mouth about that word. So your consultant that's going to do this initial research work, don't come back and say conservancy. Call yourself something else, whatever it may be. Several of your initiatives, including the, I think on slide 2 or 3, I'm not sure, maybe go to slide 3. Yeah. Development of new parks and maintenance and programming of parks. That's why we exist. I just think that's why we're here, and I would have a real problem with that. And as much as you're right, what I think I'd like to have you consider, and I don't even know if this would work in our structure, but I'd almost say bring on 2 staff people, and we'll call them our downtown planning staff and be part of our planning so that it is part of the overall park system and how it works. And if you want to fund this, you know, maybe there's a way to integrate it into the existing park system. Because even though you say you want to go out and raise funds, it's hard to raise money. It's really hard. And then last but not least would be the idea of the project being actually a part of our foundation. And that the downtown project would be something that sits within the foundation, because people will know you. I use the Minneapolis Foundation all the time as an example of a model foundation. And our Parks Foundation goes, their board is doing whatever they decide how they want to run it, but this might be another good alternative of something that the foundation could take on that would allow, again, raising money, specifically for downtown projects. So I'm just concerned about another nonprofit doing some of the tasks that I think we're here to do. And, but I support the idea of let's figure something out, because I know downtown needs some help, and if we're going to call it, what do we call it now? The city by nature or something the convention center's using, and if we're going to be this nature center, then let's figure out how that all works.
Exactly. May I respond to the Commissioner's points? Thank you very much. I have to say it's almost as if you've been sitting in some of the meetings that we've been in, because you've raised the exact same points we're very focused on. If you don't mind, I'd like to try and address them. I've stricken the conservancy word from my vocabulary. As it relates to too many nonprofits, we absolutely are concerned about that. We don't want to replicate and duplicate what other organizations, whether they be public institutions like Park and Rec Board or other nonprofits, are doing, which is exactly one of the things that we're going to hire the consultant to figure out. Because we didn't want to just unilaterally decide, oh, we're going to create a new organization. The right answer may very well be to take parts of these pieces and actually have them be within existing organizations. As it relates specifically to the Park and Recreation Board and or the Minneapolis Parks Foundation being those candidate entities to do these functions, that is specifically part of the purview of what we're going to ask the consultants to look at. So we have not presumed that that wouldn't be the case. I will, however, add one point, and that is some of the projects that are being contemplated are not currently Park and Recreation Board related. So there are some city initiatives, for example, that are not Park and Rec Board related. And so that's something that we're going to ask the consultants to figure out, is how can we have an organization that is working with multiple stakeholders. For example, the Department of Transportation for our god-awful looking medians. And how, so we need an organization that can work with the Park and Rec Board, can work with the city, etc. But thank you very much, Commissioner.
President Irwin.
Thank you, Chair Breland. I have some of Andy's concerns. I'm agreeing a lot with you tonight.
I know.
I'm a staunch defender of this institution, and I have concerns when you're talking about creating another institution that might do some of our roles, because I think that we do many of these things. So I take issue with some of the challenges you mentioned, but if you go to the next page, and the next one, this is critical information that the Park Board needs. Okay, we need to know what the cost is going to be, and what we're talking about is we're talking about funding someone to help get this information, which I think is something that we absolutely have to have as we make our own decisions. And the thing that's helpful is that we're paying essentially a quarter of the price to get this information. Now, we may choose to not do some of this stuff, and we, I think, should be absolutely consulted by the consultants, because I think we should be doing a lot of the activities that you've mentioned on certain pieces of property. But on other pieces of property, we have no business because it's not a park. So I would encourage the committee to support it, because this is what we're funding. This is information we need as we move forward, because I do think that the Park Board, not the DID, should be a leader in greening in downtown Minneapolis. I think that's one of our primary roles. I'm not saying we've done it well. I don't think we've done it well. But moving ahead, I think we could do a far better job than we have in the past. So I do think this is critical information, and I'd encourage the committee to support this. Thank you.
Commissioner Tabb.
Thank you, Chair Breland. I know this tends to get controversial, because there's a blurring of lines and authority, and that always makes us nervous, doesn't it? But I will say, and I represent a big chunk of this district, of this area. One day I got really frustrated and I called Patrick Todd at the assessor's office and said, would you please send me property taxes by neighborhood? And that's very telling. If you look at the downtown neighborhood, they probably pay at least 100 times more in general fund property taxes than anybody else in the city. And we do nothing downtown. We do virtually nothing. I mean, there's not a lot we do. I go to downtown meetings. They're not held at recreation centers. We just don't have a lot of facilities there. So to me, spending $25,000 to look and see what the possibilities might be when we have ultimate flexibility about what might happen in the future with that makes a lot of sense. And to me, it seems as if it's the least we can do to put some sort of statement about the fact that we even care about downtown. Because we should be greening. We should be doing these things, but we haven't. And so now this might be the kick in the pants that we need to get started. And I do feel as if we really haven't done a very good job in that whole area. In the parks area. So I think this is a good thing, and I will be supporting it.
Mr. Flores.
Thank you, Chair Vreeland. I'm kind of on the fence with this. I'm extremely supportive of the concept. But it kind of comes back to me for the conversation that we have gone through for the last year with looking at a conservancy model someplace else, and the amount of time we spent discussing that to a year later have it come back and realize that we had 9 different opinions of where we were going philanthropically, and then we never discussed that. And to borrow a term from my friends on the right, I feel like we need to get our philanthropic house in order for what we're looking at doing and what our philanthropic goals are before we start forming partnership after partnership that have all these different goals that, in a sense, can very much be competing against each other. So that's kind of where I'm on the fence with this. I mean, I think my personal view is that I think we absolutely want to partner to a certain level with something like this, but I also echo some of the concerns that I heard Commissioner Young and President Irwin mention, like and let me just ask, has this RFP been released already?
Yes, sir.
So some of the context of the RFP kind of frames the answers that you're looking for, like one of the objectives of the feasibility study is to confirm that the park board doesn't do its job downtown. And so I kind of have, I mean, I'm painting with a little bit broad of a brush there, but it's bullet 4 under objective of the study. And so, I mean, we're contributing to a study that's saying that we're not doing what we're supposed to, which I actually agree. I don't think that we do support downtown parks enough, but I think before we enter into another fundraising partnership, we need to assess all of our fundraising partnerships and figure out what our goals are fundraising. And there's an opportunity cost to every dollar we fundraise park related in the system, and I don't think we've started to address that yet.
Commissioner, may I?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I very much appreciate those comments, and I'm just going to speak as an individual right now. Number one, I don't think the Park and Recreation Board, frankly, is responsible for the challenges we have downtown. It is an extremely difficult environment to green. It's an extremely difficult environment to keep living. I'm a gardener. I know what it takes to try and actually have things grow. It's a very hard nut to crack. And when you then look at what is underneath the concrete layer to try and plant trees, and then when you look at the number of people who live and work downtown, literally hundreds of thousands every single day are either living, visiting, or working downtown, and the wear and tear on those public amenities that we have, it is a very, very difficult task. And quite frankly, very different from the task, many of the other tasks that the Park and Recreation Board do. So I think any organization would struggle on that. And so I don't think we should feel badly about where we are today. I think we should be looking forward and say, okay, how can we fix this as a community? To your point on should we create another organization that is a fundraising organization for green and public realm, I think it's a very valid question that is within the scope of what the consultants are going to look at. Absolutely a valid question. And I will tell you that I think my presentation is perhaps not worded as well as it could be, because it does presume that a new organization will be created. I'm not sure that that's actually where this is going to fall. That's why we need to hire consultants to think about that. But we want the Park and Rec Board to be at the table providing this sort of input. And it might actually, I think, clarify perhaps some of the things that you just raised that the Park and Rec Board should be figuring out, which is, how do we do this fundraising part, and is this type of entity going to help us, or is there another way to go? So I think it would actually help solve those questions.
Commissioner Kummer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Vreeland. Again, I'm not on this committee. However, at least 4 of us sitting here have served on the city's planning commission. I'm one of those. And I recall from those days there that every project, downtown, whatnot, had a green component that they had to do. I also know that it got shaved, squished, modified for all kinds of reasons. And I think that maybe the city's planning arena is the one that has a great deal more ability to get that done than maybe we do, because we don't have that kind of entree or that kind of control over. I'm going to give us a little bit of a pass on what we have or haven't done downtown, because it just hasn't been our focus. But as people do live downtown and there is more need for green space, and we recognize it. We've got a couple of folks here, the chair being one, who is a horticulturist, and there's a gentleman sitting back there in the corner who know an awful lot about trees. And at one point in my previous career, I was staff to the Regulated Industries Committee, and I got this wonderful peek at what's underneath our city streets. And you are so right. The opportunity, the spaces that are available where trees could actually be planted and their roots go down and they live, there's not a lot. And I don't know how big a pot you need to sit on the street to grow a tree in. That's just one minor issue with that. So I think that any kind of scrutiny that can be directed to this problem from whatever sources is a really good idea. Our Assistant Commissioner of Planning has already got a pretty good plate full of things to do. So planning for downtown might, well, he'll need a consultant. He'll need to hire a consultant, right? So maybe this shortens up that process. And I'm assuming Loring Park is not part of this district. Am I right?
Well, actually,
Oops. Careful how you answer that.
there's no, so Commissioner, no, I just want to make clear that participation, if we have an organization that is playing a partner like this, the participation is going to come from the stakeholders who actually have a park or have an amenity, whether that be private or public. So there is no specific list of here are all the things that are in scope. To some extent, I personally believe it may be a build it and they will come. I will say that the Gateway Initiative is one specific project that we believe could be the first project for this type of organization, because it mixes private property, public property owned by the Park and Recreation Board, and public property owned by the city, all in one initiative. Oh, and public property owned by the U.S. government. So a parcel of land adjacent to the post office. And so we think that that could be a project if the committee that is focused on the Gateway chooses to bring this organization on board, whatever it happens to be. And frankly, the Gateway Initiative is a perfect example. There is no entity today, whether it be the city, the Park and Recreation Board, or the Downtown Council, the DID, that is stepping forward and saying it's within our purview to create this vision and to be the coordinating entity. So it's a very good example of the need for some sort of coordinating entity that crosses over these different, these different types of stakeholders.
I didn't hear your answer about Loring Park.
Oh, so Loring Park.
Three people tried to answer for you.
If Loring Park, if the Park and Recreation Board someday says, geez, we would like some fundraising help for Loring Park, you could ask this organization to help on that if you wanted to.
That's a little different approach. Thank you.
You raised another point that I did want to touch on. I'm sorry. Your first point
the Planning
was,
Commission.
Oh yes. It's an excellent point. So we've been discussing what would this organization do. We have a horrible problem right now with either city ordinances that are not being followed correctly or city ordinances that don't make sense and aren't actually achieving what we want them to achieve. But guess what? We can't find any organization that thinks it's their responsibility to actually do this. And I personally believe that I could go to some of my colleagues who work in companies downtown where they're just driven crazy by the fact that all the stormwater goes off these asphalt parking lots into the city sewers and ultimately in the Mississippi River. And we could get some money pulled together to actually have an organization like this do the policy analysis necessary and then, frankly, bird dog the public stakeholders to get these ordinances changed so that we start achieving some of these results. But right now there's not an entity that's going to step forward and say, yep, we'll do that.
Or even require the parking lots to put in trees on the edges or down the middle.
I have to admit I actually contacted my city council member last week. A property owner across the street had a beautiful tree and a planter in their surface parking lot downtown, and they repaved it and they ripped out the planter and got rid of the tree. And so now there's no tree. And so I called the city council member and I said, doesn't the ordinance require that if there is some green on the parking lot that they at least keep it? I haven't heard back yet, but I will, I'm sure.
You get a new little tree.
President Irwin.
Thank you. We're taking a lot of time on this, but this is important. We're talking about a major greening initiative downtown. Again, I have concerns with a lot of what you say. I think the park board should be doing a lot downtown, and I think that you should be hiring the park board to do the maintenance on potential future parks. That's just a personal opinion. We might disagree on that.
And the consultant could come back and say that.
And the consultant could come back and say that. And that's what I would say, that there's certain things that are our purview. Street trees are our purview. But I don't think it's our purview if the DID wants to put, or the businesses want to put hanging baskets down Nicollet Avenue like exist in many downtowns and water them. I'm not so sure that we want to take on watering baskets in downtown Minneapolis. There are things that are our purview and there are things that are not our purview, and this is going to help sort that out to identify those things. So that's why I support it. I don't support some of your assumptions. Because they're based on history, and I think we could do a great job taking care of things. And I also, and I think we all believe this, but I think we feel strongly that we need to provide people with a livable wage, and so it is in our best interest as a city to make sure that we pay people, be it union wages or a livable wage, whatever you want to call it, to take care of our parklands, so that the people who work here can actually live here. So, that's all. Thank you.
Commissioner Walensky.
Thank you, Chair Vreeland. Mr. Wilson, thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting forever to get a chance to speak.
Actually, parks are my passion, so I loved listening. I learned a lot about golf tonight, which I didn't.
We're going to 10, so.
I just want to point out, there was one thing in your RFP that was a buzzword that got all the people that pay attention to these things running, and that was benefit from a nonprofit conservancy to aggregate public, private, and nonprofit funding. That's what sets them off. When you say that word aggregate and then you put public in there, they're thinking you're going to come and just take money out of the park board's pockets to do whatever, which I don't think is what you're planning to do, but because it was written like that, it sent everybody crazy. And so now you know anything that you're going to share with us that becomes a public document you might want to edit before you give to us. As far as that goes, I am the current member of the Park Board sitting on the Planning Commission, and I would like to stress to my co-commissioners here that because the chair of the Planning Commission, David Motzenbecker, sits on the greening team for the Downtown Improvement District, as these projects come forward, such as the Ryan project that's on the old Jaguar site and the Opus project that's on Nicollet Mall. On the Opus project, they kind of put some green space on the sidewalk to try and match the plan. David has gotten them to push it back 60 feet to add extra. So we are actually following the plan that they have come up with so that this is now happening, which is what we need these kind of plans for. If we don't have the plans, we can't pressure people into following them. And so it is happening. Ryan companies, we're going to put the green space over here and make that green corridor that you want to go down to the river for your Gateway Park. Hello, hallelujah, thank you. And when they do this, and the greening that they put out in front of their buildings, they are now responsible for maintaining it because it's part of their building. So we're not doing it. Again, they're talking about coordinating. I don't want to go in and mow MnDOT's little green spaces going to the highways either. I want MnDOT to pay for that. So having this coordinated effort, we do need somebody to do that. We do need this plan to happen. And I think that a lot of this can happen under an organization that may need to be formed. Because again, as Mr. Wilson said, we got MnDOT. It's like the river. We've got MnRA. We've got the National Park System. We've got all that. So I think it's great to have somebody come forward and coordinate. Again, this is public realm and parks. Public realm doesn't necessarily fall under us maintaining it. And things like Nicollet Mall, that's public realm, but it's not us. So I don't think we should ever have to maintain Nicollet Mall. On the other hand, what we're talking about tonight is funding a study. Putting money towards it. Hello, here it is, folks. This is what we're coming down to. We're voting on whether or not we're going to fund a study. See this? This is the study that we got, that the city did about the parkways, that we paid a little extra to have them do it for us. So what we're doing here is we're saying, they're going to do this big study. We're going to pay a little extra so we have access to the information that we are going to need as we go forward with our downtown planning. So usually these kind of things scare me to death, but I'm going to support this because we need the information, and they're going to hire a consultant to do it, and we're going to pitch in a little bit so that we can get the information too. And so I'm comfortable with that, and I think that we should do it. Now, when we get the information, if we think there's no way in heck we're ever going to do this, they say we're not maintaining things, it's all big lies, how we feel about it, that comes when we get the study back. But I think it's worth our money to at least find out how much these initiatives are going to cost, and if there is some umbrella group that we can get so that the downtown does have this plan, so that, yes, things are coordinated. Because a lot of us ran on this. We want to coordinate with other sections of the government, the county, the city, etc., so that these things get streamlined and do them well and cheaper. This is the way we're going to find out how to do it. So I'm going to be for this. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Commissioner.
If there are no objections, President Irwin.
Brief comment and then a quick question. Brief comment is, I know, third time. Brief comment is, we're going to need this information if we ever get the park dedication fee passed. If the park dedication fee gets passed, we're going to be more active in downtown because there's development occurring downtown. We would be doing a lot downtown if that was passed this year. Just with the development proposed for this year, from what I gathered, would be right around $1.5 to $2 million that we would be spending downtown. They're going to be coming to us and wanting to work with us on that. The second thing is, David, how much is the library park? What are the initial projections for library park costs?
For the gateway or
Gateways/library park.
They have been greatly contested and debated because we haven't done any formal analysis, but anywhere from $50 to $100 million just for the gateway initiative.
So $50 to $100 million. I think that this organization would admit that maybe that is a higher price tag than what we would be willing to take on ourselves as we're trying to figure out how to take care of the parkways as well as our neighborhood parks. So just a point that we would need a partner to do just that one big central park. Thank you.
And if I could add, I think we need to move forward and continue working on these issues. In Atlanta, Olympic Park is a model to look at. Again, Bryant Park in New York. I mean, there are models that make sense that fit this. But we did have problems with our conservancy work in that we were not up front, we didn't know enough about where we were going, and then we found out that we weren't getting where we wanted to go. I'm hesitant to spend $25,000 if the conclusion is, let's not do it. So, again, I would approach this, and again, it would be great to be more on the front end, but a scope of services, deliverables, what is it that we want from these dollars rather than just a report? So, again, it's just, maybe we can firm it up before the next board meeting, a description. I'm also concerned that we've gone through a lot of effort to talk about engagement, and I tried to contact the downtown Minneapolis neighborhood associations, and they were not well informed and were not supportive. And again, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I'm voting for dollars when the neighborhood that's affected is not informed about this, or not sufficiently informed. Again, that's part of why we have a park board, is we try to vet these things. And again, I feel a little bit constrained by that. Okay, I don't see any more lights. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
And I would like to request, as we move forward, if you would consider actually being interviewed by the consultants when they are hired. We would like to have all of you that are interested in participating in the process. And Commissioner Vreeland, I would like, if perhaps offline, I could speak to you more about the neighborhood groups. It is true that for this initiative, we have not yet reached out to any other organizations. We frankly are just trying to figure out whether we can actually move forward and do this study. But I would very much like to gather some names of the right people to contact so they could participate when the consultants are actually doing their stakeholder analysis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're back at 7.1 if someone wishes to make that a motion.
So moved.